should more employees in 2022 be focused on specialization? How can specialization help firms achieve economies of scale? Also, can specialization be practically applied to current labor market conditions on the African continent? Joining us to answer these questions from Johannesburg is Vumile Nsweli, Chief Executive Officer, Hesed Consulting, career-winning career coach, or rather award-winning career coach. Vumile, thanks for joining us. When we talk about employee specialization, we're talking about skills, yes?
That is exactly what we're talking about. Good afternoon, Rotus, and to all your viewers. When we're looking at employee specialization, we are looking at really tailor-made skills where we go away from the generic and we deep dive into a speciality that someone chooses, a niche, if you can think of it that way, that someone as an employee or an employer chooses, that this is where we're going to focus on really polishing up and ensuring efficiencies in this particular arena. And that's what we call employee specialization in any space within the value chain of any business.
All right, thank you for that. And how can employers ensure the specialization of their employees?
So the first step is understanding where are you going to need economies of scale. What are you trying to make efficient? Where are you trying to, in essence, reduce some of your costs? When you identify that within your business, then you see where your employees can plug in. So unfortunately, it's not something that we can approach as a blanket approach across the board. We have to look at our business. That will define for us the areas of specialization. And most importantly, where we think our organization needs to be in the future is also where we're going to choose to, in essence, specialize in. We determine that, and that's how we then say, okay, these are the skill sets our current employees have. This is where we're wanting to, increase efficiencies, reduce costs, specialize in this particular arena. What is that gap? And therefore, we then empower employees to close that specific specialization gap that they may have.
All right. So what about employees as far as how they can invest in their specialization, how they do that?
So they identify from their own perspective, right? So as an employee, you're aware of the trends happening in your organization. You see where industry is going. You then say, okay, this is where most likely my employer is going to have to make a strategic move towards. What can I do now to ensure that by the time they require me to specialize, I've already got, my foot in the door. Of course, I'm not saying go and specialize to such a perspective that you close potential other opportunities for yourself, but make sure that your specialization in your particular industry or industries that you're interested in will better position you for that growth when it does come.
All right. And is there an argument that specialization hinders the flexibility of employees? And if yes, how can business owners tackle that?
It definitely does. So once you become a specialist in one thing, and I want us to think as something as simple as in the health sector, we've got our general practitioners, and then we also have our specialists, and sometimes even our super specialists. Yes, someone who's a super specialist, like, for example, obstetrician and gynecologist, might be a super specialist. They still know the basics of medicine. They've just chosen to drill down, meaning that where they choose to keep their focus makes them a little bit inflexible. They're not going to be comfortable going to do a heart surgery for you because it's not their specialization. So it does limit your ability to focus. What organizations can do in order to ensure that employees don't become inflexible is to ensure that they are multi-skilling across. So giving them enough of breadth as knowledge and exposure that an employee doesn't feel that they can't move across at all. But unfortunately, there is going to be a little bit of limitation the moment you choose to specialize. It means you're becoming the master of one and not necessarily the jack of all trades.
All right, I like that. So based on that, who does specialization really benefit? Employees, employers, or maybe both?
I think it does impact both positively and sometimes negatively. We're looking at employers, if you do choose to specialize in you and leverage your employees to do so, you will see efficiencies in your business. You will notice that your costs should reduce. You should notice that you're able to carve a niche out for yourself and be known for one particular thing against your competitors. So that's definitely something that will work to your employer's advantage. As an employee, you're saying you're in essence going to become a specialist, meaning you are going to close off certain other opportunities. It does mean if that skill set that you are specializing in is particularly rare, like we are seeing across the continent, specifically in Southern and East Africa, the massive demand for data scientists and software engineers, it means you can actually sign your own paycheck because everyone is scrambling for the skill set that you do have. If your skill set becomes redundant, you may find yourself in a pickle and all of a sudden in a space where you're no longer earning what you used to earn and perhaps even irrelevant. So you wanted to make sure that you're balancing that particular benefit and advantage of being a specialist without exposing yourself to a little bit too much of risk.
Oh, okay. So that feeds into my next question, I guess. So I guess you would say in the affirmative that practically speaking, when we look at labor market conditions, you mentioned Southeastern Africa, employee specialization can be applied to the conditions that we're seeing today.
We're seeing a massive drive, specifically in the fintech space, specifically in the ICT sector, where specialization is required in order to remain relevant for organizations. So we're seeing a number of organizations like the likes of Cisco, MTN, really, as well as Vodacom, throwing a lot of money in getting the right kind of skill sets in the ICT sectors, specifically also, trying to meet those black economic, those broad-based Black economic empowerment requirements by investing in women. So we are seeing that it's necessary. It's not something organizations can say, labor law doesn't allow it. Labor law right now needs it. Otherwise, we might not have the kind of labor that is skilled in the demands that we have currently. So from a practical perspective, in these conditions, organizations are going to have to start looking at their human capital, choosing where the specialist gaps are, and investing accordingly.
All right, so the specialization, I guess, happened in perpetuity. What happens after that? Is it more specialization until an employee just advances so far they go into a completely different field? How does it work? What's the trajectory?
So it starts with breaking down into a specialization, and it does happen where someone starts to drill down and become a super expert in a particular arena and becoming a real master in that particular arena. What then tends to happen from that is people that update their skills, ensuring that what they've learned is still relevant, knowing what the trends are, what's changed, what's shifted in their organization and in their particular specialization. So it goes into beyond just specialization to sometimes a maintenance of that knowledge and keeping abreast of what the latest technologies are in that particular specialization. With specialization, employees can find themselves in a completely different field. We're seeing this already where, for example, I'll talk about the ICT sector once again, where with data scientists who were very, very key in the ICT sector, now all of a sudden having demands in the banking sector, having demands even in the engineering sector, and especially in the retail sector. So you could have specialized thinking it's one particular industry. All of a sudden, that skill set is now required in other industries. So you might be a specialist here, and then you can lift and drop that specialization knowledge into other industries and opening up your particular exposure, and then sometimes even allowing you to be, a specialist in more than just one arena or one industry.
Great stuff. You so far the examples you used medicine and tech. Is this specialization where things are going? Is it tech biased and sciences biased in your observation?
In my observation, it's definitely tech. And as we know, everything going digital now, tech is influencing and impacting every single industry. There is no industry that has not been completely disrupted by technology. I love the idea of, aviation being disrupted by drones. But so was photography also disrupted by drones. So it's no longer a space where we're saying it's only this particular industry that it can be devoid of being impacted by technology. It is across the board. Of course, with people specializing in the technology space, leading that frontier and really breaking down those specialization barriers.
Finally, just less than a minute to go. With what's been happening globally, COVID, the war, commodity prices, all these things happening, has that interrupted the ability of employees to seek to hone their skills in different fields from what you've seen?
From what we've seen, it depends where you are. So if you're already on the trajectory of specialization, we are finding that employers are now driving you to really fast track that particular specialization. If you're in the space where it's very generic and your skill set in essence isn't really a specialization and we can actually get it somewhere else, what we're finding is organizations are saying, which countries geographically have mastered this as a specialization and outsourcing to their to increase their efficiencies as opposed to keeping it local. So if you're not a super specialist, we're finding that the specialization that might be perceived as generic in your industry and geographical location is most likely going to be outsourced to where it's viewed as a specialization in another part of the world.
Very, very interesting. Vumile Msoili, CEO, Hesed Consulting, award-winning career coach. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about specialization. Very interesting topic.